Hey, welcome back to the Rhetoric Warriors podcast. We are cleaning up American discourse, one unethical persuader at a time, because they're out there, Tom.
Yes.
I am Dr. Dan. I'm an American rhetorician, late night comedy writer. Got interested in politics and started a brand about it, rhetoricwarriors.com. My guest this week, I now associate you with New York. So you're going
Yeah.
to be a New York comic, but by way of Philly.
Yeah.
In Florida.
I didn't start in Philly, started in Florida, born and raised in Philly.
Okay, so
Philadelphia.
West Palm. That's So I also think of you as
West
Florida.
Palm. Yeah.
He's a writer's comic. We'll explain what that is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a writer's comic.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 Lettermans, right?
2 Lettermans, bumped on a third. Standing in the wings on a third.
Kills it at the clean corporate comedy. Has done tons of that over the years.
Yeah.
Does some impressions.
I do.
A little surprising, but we're going to pull some of those out.
Oh, okay.
He's a pool shark, so watch out. Don't play pool with this guy.
That's right.
And he can talk some politics. Tom Ryan.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And obviously, I'm only used to doing Zooms at night, and I've discovered that my daytime lighting is a little off, so we'll just have to bear it.
You know what it makes me think of, Tom? Like you've got this sort of like author writer ethos where you're living in like a busted down kind of a room and you're just doing your thing, man. You're Edgar Allan Poe back there.
This is the good angle of my room. That's about and I do need to get I was telling you earlier, I got a new MacBook Air. I finally jumped over to the Mac.
Yeah.
And I'm learning it. It's not as intuitive as everybody says. I know I'm a little bit on the dumb side, but it's not as easy as you people have been telling me for 20 years. You got to get a Mac. It's so easy.
No, man. Every pathway has its briars, right?
Oh,
has its blind alleys, and like this should work. No, it doesn't. Look at that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, now I think I'm really bad with learning curves. I am now in I guess some kind of dumb mode. It has thrown me for a loop, the experience of getting this new computer, and I don't like it. It's homework.
That's okay. That's you realize in life is a wheel, like a pie wheel. So there's all sorts of pie slices, and in this pie, I'm just going to be dumb.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
That's what I'm going to be.
As long as we can compartmentalize our stupidity, we're good.
Yeah, it's not a pervasive stupidity. There's some things that you know.
I like it. Yeah, I have some real blind spots in this life. I'm good at certain things, and other things I just really and I sometimes really do come across as dumb in certain realms. So be it.
But nobody would describe you as dumb. I mean, I think you're considered a smart comic and a smart guy.
Well, thank you, Dan. And you as well.
Well, thanks. There we go, and we're done. That's all.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
A couple of co-compliments, and we're out.
Yeah.
So run your background just a little bit, Tom. Just refine that intro a little bit for people.
Well, born and raised in the Philadelphia suburbs, about less than a mile outside of Philadelphia, actually, and grew up, went to Drexel University.
So you're a Philly guy, like you. I mean, you and Schubert, that whole
Phillies,
crew.
Eagles, lifelong, hardcore. Still love that city. Still root for their teams, and I think eventually I will go full circle and move back to Philly when I'm done with all this. I think I have a feeling I'm going to do that.
Okay.
So when got a job, I hated working where I was working. Not hated, but I was working in the insurance business as an auditor. And a friend of mine was in the golf business in Florida. He said, I can get you a job with this company down here. And I said, you know what? Roll the dice. I moved down to Fort Pierce, Florida. The company sold within 3 weeks, and I was high and dry without a job. And I thought I might as well
like 80% of Florida.
Yeah. I might as well stay in Florida for a while. And they said, move down to West Palm. You'll find a job down there. And as soon as I moved down, I saw a little ad in the newspaper, comedy club opening. and I went in and got a job as a doorman, knowing I
That's
wanted to get into that
did you?
business.
That's how I started.
Is that right?
And the Funny
Doorman?
Farm in Louisville, saw an
Yeah.
ad,
Right.
went in and applied for a door guy, didn't get the job, didn't want the job, but started doing the
Oh,
open mic. So
yeah. I actually ended up, it was a brand new comedy club. I was the one who ended up convincing the manager to start an open mic night. And I ended up starting with, I mean, what a club.
oh my
The
God,
best
yeah, you guys birthed what
comedy corner,
cable
West Palm Beach.
guy, right?
Cable Guy, Carrot Top, Todd Barry, Dennis Regan. Mitch Hedberg went on there his second time on stage. Greg Schwem, Phil Tagg. I'm forgetting some, but a
Yeah, but
lot of
what a
people
crew. I mean, what a
came out.
pedigree that is.
Oh, it was what a place to start. I used to pick up Cable Guy, who was Dan Whitney, picked him up at his parents' house, and I'd knock on the door. I drove a Chevette. Hi, Mr. Whitney. Hi, Mrs. Whitney. Is Dan home? Come on in, Tom. Dan will be right out. And there's Dan in his little cubbyhole of a room looking at his baseball cards. All right, we're ready to go. We drive down to Miami and do 5 minutes. And
That's awesome.
it
That
was
is
great.
such a yeah.
Yeah. And I always seem to catch people their second time on stage. Saw Mitch Hedberg his second time on stage, Todd Barry his second time on stage, and I believe Dennis Regan his second time on stage. So, and in the meantime, people like Seinfeld, Bill Hicks, Kevin Meaney, Dennis Miller are all coming through that club on a weekly basis. So I really hit the jackpot in terms of where to have started in
What was the name
comedy.
of that club again?
The Comedy Corner in West Palm Beach. And
Man.
you know who used to go to a lot of shows there, and they just wrote it up in Mother Jones magazine? Jeffrey Epstein used to go to a lot of shows. Now they misidentified the club as so many, when you catch a journalism mistake, when you know the inside
Yeah, yeah.
story, they go, and at the Palm Beach Improv. And I'm sitting there reading it going, it's not the Palm Beach Improv. And they even said in the 90s, there was no Palm Beach Improv in the 90s. It was the Comedy Corner. If you're going to say that Jeffrey Epstein attended many shows there, get the club right. Give
Why
them
were they
credit.
talking about Epstein and his
Give them,
comedy
I know
behavior?
well, it just because he ended up hanging out with a comic that was a headliner there. And that guy gave a lot of insight as to he loved comedy, and he used to call this guy, I won't even mention his name on the podcast, but it's out there, public domain, or it's in the public arena, who it was. He used to call this guy and ask him questions about comedy obsessively. And he
That's
liked
crazy.
dark comedy. It was nuts.
Yeah, I
It
bet
just
he
came out.
did.
I happened to see it, you know. And then started doing it, worked the road, and did the comedy clubs for many years, drifted off into corporate gigs. I don't even do that many of them anymore. Well, we don't do anything anymore, but uh, um,
I'm gonna at
did a
some
couple
point.
Letterman.
At some point, I'm gonna circle back around because you. I don't want you to talk about this time because I want to talk
Yeah,
about you. But you
yeah,
travel with Hicks for a while, right?
yeah. I opened for him a lot.
Yeah, we'll come back and do a whole episode on
Sure,
that because
you got it.
like all these guys, everybody's getting older now. Like Carla
Yeah,
Bove is,
sure.
in bad straits, so he's probably going to be, shipping out into the,
Oh,
great
is he?
comedy club in the sky.
Know that?
Um, and then
Yeah.
yeah, all those guys. But
Wow.
such a crazy time.
Oh,
I want to come back
absolutely.
to that, but huh?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But so you've always been known, like I said, you're a writer's comic because I think you're a thinky person, you're a thinky comedian,
Uh-huh.
and you pull politics in, or at least an intellectual angle to almost everything you do,
Uh-huh. I
right?
try.
And so, what's your perspective on this? That you know, the comedian sitting here, and I don't think you don't see yourself as an arbiter of truth on stage. You see yourself as
No.
an entertainer, right?
Yeah, entertainer, but I've always dipped my toe in politics on stage. I used to do Reagan jokes when I first started. I had Reagan material.
Really? Tell me a
Yep.
Reagan joke.
It's the Iran Contra affair. Oh, it's just an affair. It's not a scandal. It's an affair. That's like going up to somebody, you're not ugly. You just have a lot of disagreeable facial features. That was that was the Iran-Contra affair
That was
joke.
the
That's all
whoa,
I remember.
whoa.
And then a few other things about Reagan. Keep in mind, that was, I was maybe a year into comedy when that broke. So, but I probably have a cassette tape somewhere. And I
Of
always thought that
Reagan stuff.
was a good idea. A good idea for comedy, a little comedy show is dated, but still applicable,
Uh-huh.
or get a comic to play a 2-minute clip of his old bits. Now explain those.
Yeah.
Explain the context with how this was funny, and you would have people on there doing, all right, well, this is a 3-minute bit about the salad shooter that kills, but I can't do it anymore. I think that'd be great to just, could you please explain why this was funny at the time?
It's hilarious. I was gonna when I was writing hardcore and talk shows, late night talk shows. They every morning they bring all the top stories to you of the day, and then like
Yeah,
different shows do it differently, and you pick the ones that either they pick them or you pick the ones you want to write about. And so
right.
really it's a chronology it's a history. Like if you kept the sample of all the things that you'd written that day, you could do a history book
Yeah.
every year of
Oh,
the year in jokes,
oh man,
because it literally
that's
reviews
great.
all the top stories.
That's great. Great idea.
But I never
Uh,
never captured them all.
it would be impossible to, I mean, that would be quite an undertaking, but it would be fun to just someday just to have people anonymously upload their audio on some server somewhere out in space, and just, this is for the archives. Here's the history of comedy uploaded, and then let other
And
people worry.
I've
Yeah,
always maybe it's because you and I love comedy both. We both love it so much. There's
yeah.
so much there that never gets captured and never gets shared with the world. Like even
Oh,
writers' rooms,
oh man.
95% of what's said in there never gets to anybody outside of that room, and it's always the funniest stuff.
That's great. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Poker.
stand up, same way. How many ideas have you had over the years? How many notebooks and
Oh,
tapes and things that have never heard the light of day?
no. And even we used to, whenever I would work Denver and Houston were big poker towns, and they always had a lot of good poker games going. And to have 6 or 7 comics sitting around a table, I can remember how funny the Denver crew was. Just great. You had people like Rick Kearns at the table, and man, everybody else, Mike Long and George McClure and people like that, and they're just ripping on
Yeah.
each other in such a funny way, not hurtful, but just slugging it out.
Yeah, just
And
those clever zingers, right?
how
Just clever zings.
clever zings. I mean, they were so quick. Kearns was as quick as it gets. And man, those were, and I used to say back then, I go, we should record these and then edit them up. They were just great.
Well, people try to capture that. You see it every once in a while, like was it Green Room on
Yes,
Showtime, and they try, but it doesn't.
it
Once you got cameras around and all that
it
stuff, it's not the same.
changes everything. Yeah, it has to almost be done anonymously for 10 years and then tell everybody, we recorded the last 10 years of these matches. Are we okay? Can we air this stuff? That's the way to do it.
Well, and I've made this. I try to make this argument my whole life. I've been making this since I was in my 20s doing stand up that comedy, you have to sort of it has no moral foundation. There's zero morality in
Yeah,
comedy.
that's a good
And
point.
so you can't drag that stuff over and then look at it in the light of culture, in the
Uh-huh.
real world and things like that, because you're going to look
Yeah.
like the worst people on earth.
Oh yeah. I think it was Doug Stanhope, who works very dark on stage. One of my favorite
Oh,
comedians of all
awesome
time.
comic. Yeah.
He's amazing. He was saying, I forget. I'm so used to hanging around comedians and being on stage. When I'm out in normal life, he quoted, I guess, normal life, he referred to it as, without that being a putting down of normal life.
Just different
He
rules.
goes, I forget. And people are shocked by the way I speak. And then I remember, oh, I better tone it down a little bit. I'm at the Walgreens right now, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you get arrested for talking like this
Sure.
outside. You cause a riot.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
invited Lawrence Thomas once to a party because a friend of mine was like, bring some comics. I'm like, you don't want
Yeah.
more than one.
Yeah.
And I brought
Yeah.
him, and I swear, like, once we started having a few drinks and an hour into the party, my buddy's like, hey, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, there's no.
That's great. Right. There is. That's funny. That's great.
But it's that sense of, and people want to put comedy to work, right? They want to put it to
Yeah.
work to uncover the truth and
Right. Right.
make society better and point out the villains and all that
Uh-huh.
kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Comedy doesn't need to do that work. Comedy is just to be funny. Now you
Yeah.
can't make it do that other stuff if you want to tandem it up like a parachute or somebody's on your back and you've got
Yeah.
society back here saying don't let me
Uh-huh.
drop.
Right.
But that's not what comedy does.
No, that absolutely right. If art or comedy worked, as people say it works on a certain level. But if it was about the truth, we never would have gotten to the point where you have Trump as president to pivot to politics.
Right?
I remember saying that in November of 18. I remember, I think I was telling my brother, hey, guess what? He got elected. Art doesn't work. That's it. There's your evidence right there. And all this people saying, oh man, if I'm going to change society for the better. No. And there are people that would come on here and go, what are you nuts? That was a great presidency, whatever. In my opinion, it was horrible. It was a disaster. I think I'm on the right side on this one, but who knows?
Oh,
But
I don't.
yeah,
Everybody's gotten,
yeah,
they've gotten shy about,
yeah.
the things
Hold on.
because they don't like to get all the blowback
Yeah, yeah.
and again, part of my thing is you just haven't like these are complicated times that require sophisticated techniques. That's one of my taglines for this, brand is
Good. Yeah,
that, the left needs to be taught better if they're going to persuade the right, or if they're even going to compete with the right, they need to
yeah,
be taught how to do it. And I think comedy is a great location for this because if, if a shock comic like a Dave Attell or a
yeah,
Stanhope or somebing like that had been
yeah.
allowed to be one of the moderators at a debate,
Oh man.
Trump would never have made it off the
Yeah,
stage.
yeah. That's right. That's why at the time, like when he first got in, I thought the next guy to go after him that can beat him would be Al Franken. That's who I had my eye on. And then that all fell apart. But I would have loved to have seen that of him just cutting through the bullshit in real time.
Right.
It would
And
have been,
you
it ended
just
up working out okay. I don't care how Biden ends up as a president. To me, he's President Firewall. He already served history. President Firewall prevented 4 more years of that guy by whatever means, and it wasn't stolen. That's enough for me. He goes into my top 10 as of November 3rd of 2020. Top 10 president of
yeah,
all
for
time.
sure. But when you go back and like
What he does.
I want you to explore this idea with me because I really do find it fascinating. One of those little side projects that I'll fold into this brand fairly soon is my comedian Americans project,
Uh-huh.
which is that we don't use comedy correctly. Like if you wanted to do societal functions, awesome, but you've got to adjust to what comedy brings to the moment. The society has to
Yeah.
adjust. Don't
Yeah.
don't go adjusting comedy. So like
Right.
comedian Americans are the most oppressed group in the
Oh,
world. You can't like that thing about
no,
stand up. You cannot be yourself in
no.
public. You get fired, you get beat up, you
Yeah.
get sued. What's
Yeah.
all that?
I'm a non-shock comic, and I've come close to getting beaten up after shows. And I'm a non-shock comic. And and it is funny how it's like
Like what happened? Tell the story
let
of
it
it.
oh, I mean, one time it was a military base in Panama City, Florida, rowdy, drunken, and some guy starts heckling me. And I was on that particular night, and I got him. I was always pretty good with hecklers, which was surprising to myself. And I cut him down pretty good. And he comes up to me afterwards, and he bumps me, and he goes, "Man, you were horrible until I came along." I go, man, I buried you, because I was still pissed that he was interrupting the show. and and then like little words were exchanged. 2 minutes later, I'm walking into the men's room. I look behind me. There's three guys following me into the men's room, and I knew what they had in mind. And I actually went over to the bartender. I go, "Can I get a somebody to walk me out to my car? I'm out of here." And then other times, just when, oh
It's
man,
crazy over
it
over
was.
words in public, like over
I was
comedy.
one time I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and I was making fun of a certain brand of car, and I can't remember. And a guy in the front row, that was his brand of car, and he's glaring at me. And his girlfriend is, I can hear her. She's going, "Let it go, let it go, let it go." And then other
Let it
instances,
go.
let it go, let it go. And I could see the glaring, and sometimes just arguments after shows. But I mean, Bill Hicks got attacked after a show one time for,
Oh, I know
I
lots
think
of
that's a
comics
true
that have.
story. Broke his leg because he was making fun of the American flag.
So you
Uh,
take that stuff like, everybody again wants to, keep comedy over here in kind of an impotent
yeah,
space. They don't
and
want to let it into our politics.
no,
They don't want to let it into corporate America. Like they
right,
just want to make it a little servant. Like if you watch
yeah,
like the Geico,
yeah,
all the insurance companies like on sports right
uh,
now, it's just, comedy routine after comedy routine. They probably
oh,
stole a lot of the lines from comics.
oh, and deliveries. The thing that drives me crazy about advertisers, they steal comedic deliveries,
Hmm.
and then they all learn them, and then they just beat them to death. Everybody right now is, so anyway, what? I
Yeah.
guess I look stupid up here with my dented car. No, you don't look stupid. And then, oh, it drives advertising. There's such thieves of
Well, and
the
that's what I'm
world
saying.
of
They want to
comedy.
use comedy for their
Yeah,
purposes, but
yeah,
they don't want to turn comedy loose to let comedy do good social purposes.
yeah. That's a great point. I stop policing it and stop, because I know comics who go, I don't know if I can do this anymore, in terms of, I find myself editing out so many bits, whereas if I could just let it rip, it's frustrating. And I'm not even an edgy comic, and yet I occasionally watch what I say on stage.
Sure, you get this self censor, and
Yeah,
and like with art, you can compare comedy to art. They're both
yeah.
aesthetic practices. You know, um,
Mhm.
you can't once you start doing that, you don't get Picasso's, you don't get
That
cool stuff. You get
that's right.
realism. You know, with a barn over and
Yeah,
over 5,000
that,
times. You
that's
want your
right.
comedians and your artists to be as crazy and as pushy as possible.
Yeah, that's great. Let them roam, and they'll find new turf, and it'll be fun.
Well, and they found
Instead,
solutions to things. The other thing about comedy is thinky. It
yeah,
generates ideas.
yeah,
Like you can actually come up with comedy solutions to to difficult problems, and you're like, we could probably kind of do that.
yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, it's funny on Twitter when Jim Gaffigan, great comic, stays out of politics. He finally had enough, and he started railing on Trump,
Yeah, I
and
saw that.
Twitter people just went after him. And somebody had the perfect response. Oh, you mean the guy who's been observing life successfully for the past 30 years is out of line here? you know?
That's great.
And it's like, let, so you're allowed to talk about life, but this little slice of life known as politics, hey, you stay away from that. And that little slice of life known as religion, hey, 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 I don't mind him. Get up there and entertain me. You were okay until you started talking about politics. I had a guy say that to me after a show one time. I started railing on Limbaugh, and you were funny, and with a dismissive, you were funny up until you went into politics. I go, what's wrong with going into politics? That's a tradition that has been with us for ever since comedy came around. Johnny Carson, Bob Hope, come on.
I mean, Mark Twain. Go back
Mark,
to
what? Yeah, exactly. Will Rogers. I mean, I'm not allowed to weigh in because I'm not. Hey, get away. And
well, and I
then
think it
on
goes back
Twitter,
to people aren't trained how to receive public talk anymore. This idea
Yeah.
that, hey, you see a little bit of it, they start to learn, some of the rules for that says, hey, I'm not walking into your house and, stealing your American flag. I'm
Yeah.
talking about walking into your house, stealing your American flag,
Yeah. That's right.
you know?
That's a difference. That's great. I still have a cold.
Yeah,
Don't mind me.
you caught the COVID.
I had the COVID, and the cold is still with me. Just a cough that won't go away. Oh,
So talk about some of
I,
that. Like you did a whole Limbaugh album. I mean, because
oh,
media
it's funny.
mesmerization, which I try to explain to people, like
Yeah,
Fox and the right wing and all. It's like Fox is not even American. I mean, he's Australian.
Australian.
You wouldn't let another country, like if China or Iran or somebody said, "Hey,
Yeah,
we want to open up a fourth network in your country,"
yeah,
people
yeah.
would have been like, "Are you crazy?" But we let
I
him
know.
in because he's white,
Yeah,
and he
and
just
he was.
imported this bullshit propaganda into the middle of America.
It's amazing. And I always do the timeline. We were talking. I forget who I was talking to, but I've done this timeline, this progression for years. How did we get to Trump? I see it as very simple. The when Falwell and Reagan hooked up, that brought religion into politics. Then from there, Limbaugh was next. And I remember I always considered myself a liberal. I didn't have a problem with that. And I remember after he started with his cigar bars, that was a big thing. All of a sudden, I used to get into arguments with comics, and it would be a very, yeah, but you're a liberal. You liberals, you don't believe in facts. And I started noticing, what is this blowback? You liberals, and you don't accept facts. Where's this coming from? And I kind of knew this Limbaugh thing was over on the side. Didn't realize what a monstrous following he had developed. Started following and hate listening to him on occasion when I could. But it went Reagan, Falwell, Limbaugh, Fox, and Drudge. Now, Drudge has since gone not so far right. Drudge, Breitbart, Alex Jones, and that's how we ended up with Trump. It was a progression, but the dominant force in that was Fox, no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, it was a network. I mean,
Yeah,
they were literally able to import, a full network, a fourth network
yeah,
that sat right next to it, got all the credibility of the other three networks.
yeah,
Nobody questioned that this thing was news or not. They just
right.
adopted all the aesthetics and all the terminology and the everything else of the established news, and
Yeah,
then just imported propaganda into it.
and
And even the
then
propaganda
yeah,
wasn't that far off of regular news.
yeah, that
Just the
that that's
content was
right.
different.
And they added more music, a
Yeah.
drum
Oh,
beat,
then they went entertainment
and a
hardcore at the news.
and a waving American flag in the upper left-hand corner when we were at war. Don't you criticize anything you say, because up there in the left is that waving flag. I mean, that was so, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And then even me saying that, people go, "What are you, anti-American?" No, I like the news. Just give me the news, or even the opinions. But I remember the waving flag and the music at the height of and if you said anything against the war, you hate heroes. You hate heroes. You know,
Yeah, they activated all that kind of, super triggery defensiveness, like it's all
patriot.
surface thinking. It's all right there on the
Yeah,
surface of the symbols. Nobody goes underneath it. And just the
yeah,
act of trying to go underneath it becomes, to these people, an attack. Like just
yeah,
accept the surface that we're building. And if you question any of that, then you're an issue. And
yeah.
again, you can pierce that, but you need a different set of communication techniques to do it. Like part of the thing I do on the podcast is converting conservatives.
Uh huh.
And because I know how to talk, in ways that conservatives can accept
Yeah,
without triggering them to like feel defensive and go off on me. But it's
yeah,
just techniques, And I don't define myself as a liberal. I define myself, again, like I said, as a comedian American. I vote for the
That's
funniest,
good.
nicest,
Yeah.
most fun candidate because they're going to make my life better.
Yeah.
I don't vote for people that are, hyperactivated and upset.
Right. Right. Well, it's funny because yeah, I mean, I wish I need to learn those techniques because I step in just phone conversations with people who friends who have voted for Trump, whatever. It's hard to get through a conversation if you and it's impossible not to graze up against politics. It's hard. I remember talking to a friend who voted for Trump and the insurrection is happening on my TV in the background. Hey, so what else is happening? And meanwhile, there's they're storming the Capitol, and I'm like, don't bring it up. I don't need a headache right now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
gotta go. I gotta
Yeah.
watch. I said I gotta watch all this chaos. I gotta go. But we had some arguments earlier. I go. I don't need the headache right now. We can talk politics, but sometimes it gets heated.
Yeah. So you did an
And I
entire Limbaugh album, didn't you?
yes, I did, and it didn't go anywhere. I had such high hopes for it. I at some point did a pretty good impression of Limbaugh, so I airdropped him
Do you remember any of the bits
into
that you did as Limbaugh?
yeah, I do, and it's available. The whole CD is up on YouTube. Rush Through Time, and as soon as I released it, I found out Rush had an album called Rush Through Time. So how do you like that? Because
Really?
basically, I was going to call it Rush Through History, but I just liked Rush Through Time. So it starts in 1773, as if Limbaugh has been on the air for 200 years. Starts in 1773 with, and I open it with flute music, the old penny whistle sound. And hear ye, welcome, my friends. Did you see what happened the other day? They are calling it the Boston Tea Party. This was not a party. This was a group of rambunctious anarchists who are trying to take a, and on and on and on.
Oh,
And
that's
then
awesome.
then the next segment, he just rails on Benjamin Franklin for the way he dresses. Look at those boots and those fluffy shirts and his lightning rod. And then on and on and on through history. And I ended it on the Watergate. That was the final segment, was Watergate. I thought after that, he kind of came along. And I was going to do a segment on Reagan, the election of Reagan, because that would have been the last one. I just never got around to doing that one. So it goes from Boston Tea Party through the Revolutionary War, through the Civil War, abolitionists, World War II, JFK, and then and MLK, and then he weighs in on the Beatles. I'm glad they're burning their records, and all that. So it was a fun project to do. I just taped it on my little my Zoom H4 recorder. I'll give them a plug, the Zoom H4
Yeah, there you
recorder,
go.
and put it out as a CD. But I messed up the intros. I tried to make them like kind of. I gave them a weird sound effects in the intros, and it kind of, I think, it made it less market. I don't know what it did. I put effort into marketing it, but it just never took off. It still lives. It lives on the internet, and I think it's a decent. Even after Limbaugh is gone, it'll live as a decent American historical document of this is how people spin events
Yeah. No, for
in
sure.
a
I'm gonna check that
consistent
out.
way.
That's awesome. I didn't know you
Yeah,
did it like retroactive like that.
yeah. It was, and it's the whole thing is it's on YouTube. If you go Tom Ryan Rush Through Time, and one of them I got animated. If you look up Limbaugh Franklin Tom Ryan on YouTube, I have a Benjamin Franklin or Limbaugh animated in revolutionary type garb, railing on Benjamin Franklin, and Chris Fairbanks did the artwork.
Okay.
He is really good. And then a guy named Darren Santamaria, I believe, did the animation. And their credits are on there. I think I'm getting Darren's name right. But it was fun. And then it just kind of didn't get anywhere.
Well,
And I
it's a
should have tried
weird
to get them
thing.
on.
It's a weird
Yeah.
thing for comedy. Like Colbert made it work, on his show, the Colbert Report, because he was playing a right-wing character,
Yeah.
but he was playing it so well, and the writing was so good, and he was
Uh-huh.
lampooning it at the same time. But it's almost like listening to that much Limbaugh, even as a parody, I'd be like, I don't want to fucking listen to Limbaugh.
Yeah,
You know?
I hear you. It's I mean, I dove in, and yeah, I actually signed up for his website so I could listen to the episodes in my own time, 10
Uh-huh.
bucks a month, whatever. And I would listen to him, and it was hard to really get that impression down. I did as good as I could, did as well as I
That's a
could.
good Limbaugh. Yeah.
And it was like I was reasonably happy with how it came out, and I thought the writing was I I put everything I could into it.
No, they're right. You could tell right there just from the stuff you did. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, this is going to
it's a
have a
rhythm
great
thing.
writing. You get a good impression of it. Yeah, I would
Yeah,
definitely
he's
think
all
that would
about
work.
pauses. He's all about pauses, and he's very good at what he does. I
Well,
just
all
don't.
those guys,
Like,
people don't really
yeah,
realize, it's propaganda and it's, total, flaming horseshit. But
yeah,
the talent, those guys are incredibly talented. Alex Jones has a
yeah,
great voice.
yeah, yeah. He does.
They all like they import all those things again that have been developed aesthetically that work in TV and they work on radio and they work, in all those different ways. And then they just put in new, I call it the hot dog theory. Like you get the hot dog all done, like it's got ketchup and mustard and relish and chili and cheese and it's
Yeah,
perfect. And then they
yeah.
change the hot dog, you know,
That's
they put in
great.
like a dog food hot dog.
Yeah, that's great.
You can't
Yeah,
tell because
that's
it's
a good.
covered up with all the other stuff.
All the other stuff. That's absolutely.
It really throws people's brains off, and that's what
Oh,
happens. Like it's literally, I have a series that I'm doing, and I'll turn this into a class at some point too, just about like why the right is wrong, because people lose their radar. Like a lot of the impulse that the right has, that energy and that kind of activation about protecting America and America,
yeah, yeah,
that'd be fine if it was over in progressiveness about let's make America really great.
yeah,
Let's get
yeah.
rid of poverty.
Right, right.
Let's do a
Yeah, why
universal
not?
income for everybody.
Uh-huh.
That'd be great energy. We need that.
Oh, it would be. Could you imagine if Trump had done, if he had taken a kind of a World War II approach to the virus and given the same energy to wearing a mask as people gave to victory gardens in World War II and made it so patriotic that it would become, you would have people attacking you. How dare you not wear a mask? This is America. You know,
Well, and they were going to send
everybody.
PPP to everybody. They could have sent an orange one with his face on it. I wouldn't have cared. Or,
Yeah,
like a whole American flag,
yeah,
PPP, and everybody
right.
wear those. And if you saw somebody out who didn't have it, you're exactly right. You'd be like,
Yeah,
what, are you not American?
right. You're not American. That's right. And he could have, and he would have won re-election had he handled that correctly, I think. So
Yeah. Well, and I made this argument
maybe
along the
not.
way about Trump is if Trump is our biggest political villain, I think in this country's
Yeah,
history, at
yeah,
least far back as we remember.
right.
Um, if he'd have switched at some point and become a liberal, like right in the
Yeah.
middle, because
Oh
he was
my
a
God.
liberal, he was a New
Yeah,
York liberal.
I know.
If he'd have
Yeah,
just switched up and was like, I'm tired of all this crazy Republican crap.
yeah,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm switching to the Democratic Party
right.
and just supported every progressive policy, he would have been the biggest hero on earth.
That's, oh man, there's an alternate kind of history, kind of or had he just toned it down? I got my tax cuts, I got my judges, get off of Twitter, tone it down, just let them flail away about the fact that you golf a lot, and he would have been fine.
Yeah, he could
He
have
shot,
literally his
he
like
shot
a
himself in
second
the foot every day.
could have got a second term and just said, "Look,
Yeah,
I'm going to let all these guys run it. And I'm going to play golf for 4
yeah,
years." And they would have been
yeah.
like, "Okay."
Okay, yeah. You're still going to oversee it though. Oh yeah, I got a cell phone at the course. Okay, cool.
No, 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 not even that. Just like,
Right.
yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
be president, but
Uh,
I'm not going to do anything.
we would have been, yeah. Well, we're so lucky. When you mentioned I had COVID. I caught it, and it got a little. I got pretty sick there for a while, but I was kind of curled up in a fetal position. It was right after the election. I curled up in a fetal position, going, "But at least Trump didn't win again. But at least Trump didn't win again."
Oh
So
my
that
God.
made me realize the
Did you feel
severity.
that? I mean, just the day that
Oh,
Biden won and people
yeah,
spontaneously
it
danced in the streets
burst out into the streets
around the world.
around the world. It was so cool. Oh,
Insane.
I'll
And then
never
the
forget.
day, the only other time that came close to that was the day that Trump got pulled off Twitter.
Yeah,
That silence
yeah.
that suddenly spread everywhere was like,
Oh,
my
it
God,
was
we've been
beautiful.
like, it's that feeling of if you've ever, had somebody in your family or in a relationship with a narcissist or a
Uh-huh.
sociopath and they're
Hmm.
gone.
Yeah, the posture changes.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Um,
So would you
oh, I'm
like to
so
do more like political stuff? Like if you could
well.
make a living at that without all the blowback, would you think that would be
Yeah,
a fun career?
yes, that's where I'm more interested in that. That's where my passion lies. I had about maybe 5 minutes on Trump, and then about 3 more minutes on guns that I was doing. But mostly I was doing it at the comic strip, and I would try to do it at that comic strip here in New York, and I would I would try to do some Trump material. I got a gig at an over 55 community down in South Carolina, and I did the first show. It was sold out, went great, couldn't have gone better. Yeah, I'm over 55, so suddenly that crowd, it's like I like this crowd. That golf
Yeah,
community
yeah.
kind of. We're retiring at age 55. We're going to hang out and play golf. Got it. First show went great. Second show was about half full, and I'm going along and I'm doing fine. But I go, you know what? I just want to see, what if I do some Trump material? Because this is a lot of people from different regions around the country that have moved here. And I mean, silence. And I had been doing well. And then I joked about the fact that, I wasn't going to do any Trump material here tonight. And they laughed, and then after the show, this woman, I'm in, like, wasn't even a green room. It was like kind of this carved out little half a rectangle off the kitchen. And the exit for half the crowd was right past me. And I'm just standing there looking at my phone. Good night. Thank you for coming. She goes, and this woman goes, I don't think you realize this, but this is Trump country. Oh, it's not Trump country, but I mean, it is Trump country, but it's like, who cares? What wouldn't it? I remember going to a comedy show, and Nick DiPaolo, it was right after Obama got elected. He was railing on Obama. I was a big Obama fan. I was laughing because, you know what? It was funny.
Yeah.
Tim Wilson used to do some Democrat bashing material. It killed me because it was funny. And Tim Wilson is one of my favorite comedians ever. He
Yeah.
was great. It didn't bother me a bit. And why can't I don't mind right-wing humor if it's funny. So
Yeah.
let me have my 3 minutes of railing on Trump. Don't you want to see yeah, like you said earlier, can I do the unfiltered version of me? And then I didn't bother doing my gun material because that you
Well, what's
just.
the gun material? Do a little bit of it for me. I want
Well,
to
the
hear it.
gun material, it's funny because I've always and I can't, I won't remember because it's almost, I've only done two shows in the past year, but it was a woman at a party on the Upper West Side, the liberal dot within a liberal city. Upper West Side, it doesn't get any more liberal than that. And it was at a party that Kostaki held in his lobby. And a woman was there from Indianapolis. And she came right over to a group of us comics standing there. She goes, so I like New York and all that. She barely introduces it. I like New York and all that. But where are your gun ranges? I'm like, that was her first. Where are your gun ranges? I go, and I knew right away. Okay, here we go. Here we go. She's looking to pick a fight with some New York City liberals, right? Where are your gun ranges? And the bit goes, well, we were going to put one at the corner of 82nd Street and Fifth Avenue, but instead we decided to build the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Is that the kind of liberal answer you were looking for? Have you checked the square footage rates in Manhattan lately? Do you know how big your gun range would be? 4 by 8 feet. You would hit everything. And then she goes, well, I guess you've never read the Constitution. And that made me really mad because she was right. I've never read the Constitution. I've made it to page 2, but it was over my head. I've been meaning to read Moby Dick my whole life, just haven't gotten around to it, and on and on. And there's a lot more in there, but it was a fun bit. And I started to realize I enjoy doing this stuff more than I liked what I've been doing for the past 30 years. I would love to pivot over that direction because I don't get, I'm 61 now. I don't get the corporate gigs that I used to get. I'm aging out of the clubs, out of the corporate gigs. So I'm lucky I have some of my material in with Sirius Radio. They pay royalties, and then I can work clubs in the city and I scrounge together a living. But what I would like to do is, do more of that kind of stuff, railing on Trump, talking about guns. And it felt liberating to kind of start doing that kind of stuff. And then it was interesting to try to, okay, I get it to work at the comic strip. Not all the time. That's not all, they get a lot of tourists in there too. So I get blowback, but in general, it went over pretty well there. But then I would take it out on the road and go, ooh, this isn't working on the road. So but eventually, if the material gets strong enough, it'll work anywhere.
Right.
That's my,
well, and if you cook it down to where, the thing about really good stand-up, I call it as you can't not laugh at it. Like people can't protect themselves from it.
That's good. Yeah.
And it's that burst laughter because you can just see, like, when the punchline hits, it's so intense and so concentrated and so unexpected that they just burst.
Right. That's right. Like watching Stanhope, you can't help but be won over by how good he is. Who cares what he's talking about in terms
I think those guys, Stanhope and Burr and Hicks and those guys, I mean, you earn that from and it's intellectualizing. That's how you get your permission. Like you have to establish permission to do any kind of shock or any kind of taboo or any real intellectual exploration of social issues, and you do that by intellectualizing the thing. And those guys are so intellectual, they come back all the way around from a side door that people don't think about, and they don't protect themselves way over here.
That's great.
And so the art of that is really cool to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And Bill Hicks, one time I worked with him at the Comedy Corner in West Palm, and he said, I opened with Chevette jokes. He had Chevette jokes. He goes, I opened with about 3 minutes of Chevette jokes, and they were great jokes. And he goes, once I get them laughing, I can go anywhere I want. That kind of thing is basically what he said. He didn't always do that. Sometimes he would just open with a shock. But on that particular week, that was his approach. And he was right.
Yeah, and you earn it. You show them, hey, I know funny.
I know what I'm doing.
Laughing is important to me. So, now I'm going to go wherever I want to go. But
it was great. And I think somebody like Bill Burr can get, once he really established himself as being a great comedian, he can get it even more shocking or talk about topics that maybe he wouldn't have been able to do had he not established a certain level of credibility. I mean, incredible credibility. But it is fun to watch because it's like you can't refute this guy's great.
Yeah, and again, like they're rhetoricians in the sense that they know how to basically MMA, jiu-jitsu audiences. Like you can't criticize them because they've protected themselves with the bit itself. Like you cannot refute the truth in what they say.
Yeah.
And if they're off, and this is why DePaulo and some of the right-wing guys, even when I worked for Dennis Miller, they step in a lot bigger piles of stuff because the truth inside of their stuff, it's still well crafted, but
Yeah.
it's not, a lot of it's not true.
Yeah.
Dennis Miller would say something every show that was heinously untrue,
Uh-huh.
and the whole audience would be like, that's not
What?
true.
Yeah. Right. That's great.
But those guys know how to craft it. But I think the right runs into the problem that they, they'll say, eventually they'll say something like, "Oh, Biden, he's just a corporate guy,
Yeah.
been around for, and you're like, no, I think, look, he seems like he has real empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. There's a track record there.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're playing the senility card. It's like, it didn't
It's
work.
like, yeah, come on.
Didn't work.
There's all
Exactly.
those little elements and stuff, but it's, like I said, it's fascinating to watch people do that. And I think I would love to hear the farthest left, the most intense
Oh yeah.
politics
Right.
that you've got turned into
Yeah.
comedy. I would listen to that all day long.
That's great. Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So when I love having these clubs in the city, and the main one I work is the comic strip, but it's great because it doesn't have to work everywhere in the country, because I don't mind just doing it here in the city. And my kind of thing now is, and I was just about to record all this stuff right before the pandemic hit. I had a date set up on a weekend in March of 2020 at the comic strip to tape 25 new minutes of material, and I was going to get it all into Sirius Radio, and then it shut down. So it was a bummer, because I could be getting royalties off of that stuff right now, assuming I got it in, but I have connections over there and all that. And I'm still played there with my old material. But so as soon as it gets back to normal, I'm going to tape all this stuff. Although the Trump material, it might be gone forever, I'll put it up on YouTube or something,
Yeah.
And that,
God, I've got so many Trump jokes, 5 years of Trump jokes,
yeah, yeah,
that I wrote for Twitter and everything. Cause
right,
my thing is, I don't even really try to go on stage anymore. I do one person
yeah,
shows that I was doing here in
cool,
Austin, but I'm not
right,
really doing like clipped stand up,
yeah,
like bits. I'm trying to weave it into, it's not one person showness, it's stand up comedy, but it's built around something that's a larger theme.
yeah,
And like I started a political show and started writing a political show, and it was literally I walk out and say, look, I'm going to do politics. Every one of the jokes tonight, every single joke is going to be about politics.
yeah.
But I promise I'm not going to offend anybody.
Oh man,
And
that's great.
because I agree with all of you.
Uh-huh. There you go. That's
Like
good.
anything you say, I agree with.
Yeah.
Like I think we need a wall. I think we do. And I think like for fun, like if you're a right-wing person, you should be able to go down on that wall and pick off immigrants, you know,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
with
Yeah.
the AR-15 or whatever that you own because it's
Right.
yours. You might as
Right.
well use it,
Yeah.
and we should broadcast it all. And then you could, and so you end up taking things farther than they
That
do. And they're like, well, that's too much. I'm like,
their
what do you mean
absurdity.
it's too much?
Yeah. That's great. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love political comedy, social issue comedy. Like
Yeah.
politics gets into the politicians, and I get bored with that fairly quickly. But really good social issue comedy, it's great.
Yeah.
It's so much
Oh, the
fun.
best. That's what Stanhope is so good at it, and Bill Hicks was so good at it. You know, and it, yeah, it can be cathartic
Right.
when someone nails something. You just go, oh, I feel better about that issue now. Somebody nailed it. Because if it's confusing you and making you mad, you don't know why it's making you mad. And sometimes when a comic perfectly dissects it, you realize, oh, that's why it was making me mad. Now it's no longer making me mad because I know why it was making me mad. That kind of thing.
Sure.
Like, oh,
And
he,
it's so hard to watch people do it clumsily. Like I watched, Hillary Clinton when she tried to insult Trump's people and called them a, basket of
basket of
deplorables.
deplorables. Yeah.
I'm like, what's that from the 1800s? That's the worst insult
Oh,
I've ever
was
heard.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't even know where she got that from.
No,
Basket.
I'm saying it sounds like just a
Oh, I know.
basket. Like who uses a
A basket.
basket?
basket. That's
And the
true.
word deplorables, nobody
Yeah.
uses that. Like, get
Yeah.
yourself a good insult comic to
Yeah.
write a good, have 5 zingers about those people and you'll be fine.
I'm surprised they don't hire comedians more. And I think some of them have started to, but they should more.
Well, they're going to have to. Like, Trump introduced entertainment into politics.
Yeah,
He changed the landscape, and they've
it's
got
true.
to have new scripts. They've got to have new
Yeah,
talent
they
coming
do.
in, because like Trump just blew them all away. Like, you remember at the Republican debates, like nobody could say anything because he
No,
just destroyed everybody with
it,
insults.
it was amazing.
And if
Low
you had, like you
energy.
said, if you had a comic up there, they'd have crushed Trump into a tiny little,
Yes.
orange can.
Yeah.
But
That's
none of
why.
them had anything. Like, they have no ability to
Oh,
do comedy or
none.
think on their feet at all.
If he hadn't been the nominee, I honestly believe we would be living through the second term of a very boring Jeb Bush presidency. I mean, I really do. So there you go.
Maybe.
You blew it, Republicans. You could have had a second term. You blew it in the primary, and they blew it. They didn't know how to handle it. They thought it was a joke
Nobody
candidacy,
does. I mean, I
which it
have a
was.
thing about Trump, how Trump broke open the political pinata, and he hit it from 10 different directions with things that
Yeah,
never get hit, like no sticks that were never used in politics before.
yeah.
And nobody knew what to do, and they didn't know how to protect. And there's nobody else like Trump, by the way. Everybody's like, oh, dictators and autocrats. I'm like, there may be somebody coming up and trying. He had 40 years in the public, eye.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was so known, and then they, established him for 8 years on that stupid
Right.
reality show.
Stupid show.
There's nobody
Yeah.
else. Maybe The Rock.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. Nobody, as an absurd character. What an absurd character.
When I had
And
this thought earlier, like, everybody's like, oh, I hear people say Trump's a genius. I'm like, no, he's not. I said, it's just, he's the first one who was able to get that kind of talk into national level politics.
Yeah.
MAGA and the entire right would have been just as happy with Larry the Cable Guy doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
They should have run, Dan Whitney could have beaten Trump.
Yeah.
And he'd have been fine. It's like, all they wanted was somebody who didn't talk like, they're from Harvard.
Right. That's right. It was an Obama backlash and in fact, I talked to Cable Guy about this, about it's the hatred of fancy people has gotten a lot of mileage in politics. And that's what Trump, even though he's a fancy person.
But he didn't talk like it.
And
like he was so on script, never use a big word, never.
That's right.
That's the one thing I'll give Trump. He was well trained as an actor.
Disciplined. Yes. You know what, Ed? Like, when people say he's a genius, I've always kind of said he's not a genius. I always thought of him as a bullshitting savant. He had this savant. What was his savant gift? His ability to bullshit. He's a genius at bullshitting.
Well, he's a promoter. I mean, he came from that promotional tradition.
Yeah.
And if you go back and watch his stuff from the 70s and 80s, he talked exactly the same way. It's just
same way.
Massive overclaim, no evidence, attack anybody who attacks him. It's very traditional promoter talk. It's just weird, again, to see it imported over into politics.
Man.
Especially at a national level. So people didn't know how to defend themselves. He blew it all open. And then he went too far with the insurrection. He may have, like the insurrection may have been enough to kill off MAGA because it was so big and so visual.
The footage.
And we'd never seen anything like that in American politics.
No. So. He could have run again in 2024 if it hadn't been for that day, I think.
I don't think he's going to make it that long.
No, I know. And I think enough of us are just exhausted from 4 years of that. I became obsessed. I mean, my life became watching the news and railing against Trump on Twitter. And people say, you have Trump derangement syndrome. Yes, I do. And it's completely justified. And I know, and I was losing followers, people would stop following me. I would notice, oh, so-and-so stopped following me. I don't care. Fine. And I don't blame them.
No,
I don't blame them a bit, because I know I was obsessed with it for 4 years. And I am so glad I don't have to
Oh,
be dominated like that
the
anymore.
catharsis of it. I swear to God, it's like
Yeah,
getting out of prison.
it was amazing. I went
Amazing.
down on the day of when it was finally certified. Oh, I forget what day. No, on inauguration day, I think it was. I actually got on the subway, and I had some other things I wanted to do. Got on the subway and went down to Trump Tower just to see if there would be another spontaneous celebration, and there wasn't. Nobody was around, which was even better. It's like it's out of our system.
Right?
His worst fear, he's become irrelevant. And that was his work. That's his worst fear, is becoming irrelevant. Like, hey, join the rest of us. I'm irrelevant. It's not that bad. You know, it's not that
That's
bad.
great. That's my favorite
Enjoy
line from this
yourself.
podcast.
There
Join
you
the
go.
rest of us. We're all irrelevant. It's not that bad.
Yeah, I
I
like it.
like it.
I
Well, I need to go,
I'll write
Tom.
that.
I'm going to circle
Hey,
back
great.
around with you, buddy. Like, there's so many things I want to hear you talk about.
Absolutely. Oh man, really enjoyed this. Always enjoyed talking with you about all kinds of topics. And thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like, I've talked to, I got to start getting some more diversity somehow into my podcast. It's a parade
Yeah,
of middle-aged white guys.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I suddenly realized, oh, all my friends are middle-aged white guys, you know?
Yeah,
But I have
exactly.
like 30 guys now, and I think 27 of them been about my age and white guys.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know, half of them
Yeah,
from comedy and half of them from academics, or
yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of stuff.
You'll
But
figure it.
super fun, man. I've been having such a good time talking to smart people who are funny
You,
and
oh,
have
that's
the right
great.
morals about the world. It's been fun. So
That's great. Good luck with the podcast. I'll put it on my podcast list. I
sounds
should have
good,
a lot.
buddy. Like I said,
Good
I'll
job.
circle back around and go find Tom's Rush Limbaugh
Run,
on
run through
YouTube.
time. Yeah.
Super fun.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for
Thank-
listening to the Rhetoric Warriors podcast. Head over to rhetoricwarriors.com. Take a persuasion course. Change somebody you don't think you can change. Turns out there are techniques. And I will see you again next time.